You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Best Books of the Week, the Best Comics of the Week show here on the Weird Science channel. I am joined, as always, by my man, Gray. What up, Gray?
Hey, Jim, how's it going with you? Did you
Lovely.
say best? Did you say best?
Yeah, well, yeah. We're not going to have many things, and we'll end up telling people about that in a second. I was going to make a Grateful Dead joke and say, just like the Grateful Dead once sang, that this podcast is way better with a touch of gray, and I forgot I was going to do that. See, now I threw it in there. I had it all set. I should have waited for the next time, but hey, just pretend that that's what I said at the beginning.
I don't know that reference. I know the band, but I don't know them that well.
I'm not a huge Grateful Dead fan, and I have to admit that. But the song "Touch of Grey" was okay. The video was the one where they were like skeletons playing, and then they were actually animatronic skeletons playing. See, that's the joke. But here we are. That joke might be as bad as some of these books this week. The thing about this week, at points we were even debating on whether or not we were going to have a show. We're even doing it later because, I don't know, maybe we were thinking if we wait long enough, some other books will just drop somehow. And we'll be like, okay, these are pretty good because this was a rough week. It was a really rough week.
We were searching for really good books, weren't we?
Yeah,
we were really reaching out to find them this week.
And to let everybody know, the way that we play this game is it's the best of the week. It's also means they have to be good. It's not going to be like if you have a bunch of books that are twos that we're going to say the three. While it could be looked at as the best of that week, we're not going to play that deal. I said to you that if we have no books, maybe we'll come on and, tell knock-knock jokes or something. But we have 3 books. Usually we've had 5 or 6.
Yeah.
It's just the whole thing of this is DC has an annuals week where every 5-week months they end up at the end. They have an annuals week. And we did get a couple books. They just didn't hit the mark that we're looking for. Usually what we say is that the books have to be an 8 or above in score to actually make the show. And again, that's going to be different for a lot of other people. But DC did not make the cut this week. We have one book at Marvel that I picked, and with all of that, there is an event. It's not the event book. And while people might say, oh, Blood Hunt was pretty cool, all that, hey, you got to give it a chance, whatever. I did give that issue a chance. I graded it. It didn't make the cut, but one of the books from Marvel didn't. And we have 2 indies. Thank God you came through, because we would have only had one book then. But before we go on, please, everybody, I'm sure people have books that they really enjoyed. There are books that me and Gray haven't read. Please put those in the comments. Let everybody know what you think the best books are. And I always say this every time I do this show, and also the anticipating previews of the week show. You might end up, getting people interested in those books. They might say, oh, if enough people say one book, they're like, hey, I'll check that out. I've checked out books that you and other people in the comments have said to check out, and they're some of my favorites right now. So I beg people to keep doing that. Don't get mad at me and Gray just because we didn't love every book, and if we don't mention a book again, it might be that we thought it was okay. It just wasn't, as good. And there are a lot of times, and there's a lot of times that me and you love a series. That doesn't mean it's necessarily always going to be on the show, because there are ups and downs. There's issues that aren't great, whatnot. I just want to let everybody know so they don't yell at us. But we're going to start with the big 2 representation. It's from Marvel. It's Get Fury #1, written by Garth Ennis and art by Jason Burrows. And I was shocked by it. I've never read the Punisher Max stuff. So a lot of people have told me to read it. Oh my God, that's the best, especially at the point now where most people are down at Marvel when it comes to anything Frank Castle or Punisher, because they did that Jason Aaron nonsense, and there really and also that David P. post where you had a non-Frank Castle Punisher. So when this came out, I'm as dumb, and I'll admit it, that I thought this was going to be like Rambo. I thought it was going to be, oh my God, Punisher in Vietnam, because I've never read any of this stuff before. So I'm expecting flamethrowers and headbands and all that. And I have to tell you, while I expected that, I'm glad that I was wrong, because what we got was really, really good, starting out kind of in a slower pace, but gets you in that mood and really feels like you're watching, say, an Apocalypse Now or a Full Metal Jacket, not a Rambo. And I would say I like a Rambo now and again, but I kind of like those others even more. So I actually was very impressed by it. I actually had a lot of, I can't say fun, because in the book you get a guy get his face macheted off. That's not always looked at as fun.
That page, Jim, that was a real shock.
It was, but it shocked in a way. And some people said, "Oh, that Garth Ennis can't help himself." But it is, Vietnam wasn't a great place to be, and you had Nick Fury and these guys captured, so it really put the stakes up there. You have one guy get buried alive, another guy gets his face macheted off, even though you had Nick Fury begging the guy not to do it. And the thing, when I ended up talking about it and things like that, the idea that it's called Get Fury, number one. There's no Punisher mentioned. It is Frank Castle. It's obviously before he's Punisher. But it did center a lot on Nick Fury and really sets up the deal of, what's going to happen going forward. Is Nick Fury, you could play the game, but, you could think Nick Fury, he might get killed. He might actually get shot by Frank Castle.
Tortured.
Yeah, and Frank Castle's actual mission is to kill him as well, because he's too an important asset.
That's very
and he
Apocalypse
gets in
Now,
the
isn't it,
hands.
as you said?
Yeah, and so when you're going through that, it really threw me. Now, in that, you have Frank Castle say at one point, "Is there any way we can save him?" And they're like, "Well, you kind of think Frank might try that, but you never know." And again, being that Max deal and really playing it up, there's a lot of cursing, there's a lot of gore, and there's a machete face, which is crazy. So when people are going, "Man, that Red Band deal of the Blood Hunt," that's where I'm like, it didn't have a machete face. I saw it had some wacky stuff, but machete face, I was like, the only thing I can say is after they machete his face, they actually do the right thing and then just stab him like a piñata, because I thought they were going to make that guy walk through the jungle with his face half off. I thought it was crazy, but I really liked it. I thought Jason Burrows even has like a Steve Ditko type feel. It has, I can see feel that really does fit with the Garth Ennis stuff. And again, I'm preaching to the choir, I think, if you're a Garth Ennis fan. I like some of the things, but I haven't really read a lot of the older stuff. And I haven't read a ton, but everything I have read, except that Reptilian Batman book at DC, that was garbage. But other than that, I've been pretty impressed. It was so bad. But I thought this was good. And actually, for me, it was one of those surprises. So that's why I liked it even more. I was like, oh my God, like it's not Rambo. This is pretty cool. In a week that I really had some high expectations for a couple other new number ones that didn't make the cut for me. So this actually was more of a shock, probably less of a shock to some people, but I liked it. That's it for the big two.
I thought you'd have it on your list, Jim, because I told you it was on mine. It's a classic. It's really good. I used to read Garth Ennis back in the days of Hellblazer. That's when I first got into him. Yeah. I've not read that much of his Punisher stuff, so yeah, this was really, really, what do you call it, refreshing. You can tell he loves telling war stories. Simple as that. Exactly. And again, I'm like, overall, I'm not a huge horror guy. No. Not a huge war story guy. And usually I'm not a big Western guy. It's funny because we have a lot of that this week in our books and the picks. But when it's done right, I do like good stories. And even somebody in the comments of my video review, they said, I'll never read Garth Ennis. He hates superheroes and things like that. I'm like, I give everything a chance because I'm desperate. I mean, you could see this week, we're desperate for books. But we'll move to the indie. And we'll start with Titan Books. It is Savage Sword of Conan, number 2. And if people have been listening, they know that you're a huge fan of the Titan Books Conan. And this has a story by Jim Zub and Patrick Zurcher. Also has art by Patrick Zurcher. But Richard Pace, that you said, was getting some guff, right? Yeah, I was kind of sorry to see that because he does have, to be fair, it's a kind of basic, rough and ready, scratchy style at times, but it's very, to me, very atmospheric. And if you look at his line work, especially the expressions on the faces he draws, I thought they were really good. And as I say, Jim, it suits the story because the story is dark. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, when you told me that, I went and looked at the art. Like you said, it's not like the De La Tour art in the regular run. But this Savage Sword of Conan, it's kind of different anyway. Remember when the first issue came out, that first story in that, which people were, I think that this is AI, and like everybody, this book seems to be the one,
computer-generated art, what's going on?
Yeah, and it looked like things were like placed in a scene and things like that. But to me, having a Conan book, like even if it is a little bit like a rough around the edges kind of deal, I think it works out, and it kind of makes it look like the old. Like even like I said a comic strip to you before, but even like there was magazines I used to get, and even like role playing game magazines, and they'd have little comics in it like that. It kind of fits that. And while it's not the detail or something that you might expect, it kind of fits this book of how the style is with the black and white and stuff like that. But were the stories good?
They were. The main one, it's a long one as well. It's a dark story with creatures from some kind of maybe hell, demonic forces, cosmic gods, Jim. We got a bit of a Lovecraftian feel to it at times, which was in a lot of Robert E. Howard's, writing back in the day. You like the dark cosmic horror.
These guys look very much like cosmic horror. Like they have mandibles. They're almost like predators. They look like. And
there's a nice relationship between Conan and a young boy who's kind of surprisingly helps Conan. It's not the way around, because Conan's injured at the beginning. It's cool, get a nice little not father and son, but that kind of dynamic.
And I'm gonna read this later this weekend. I'm sure that I'll like it. I'm looking at it now, but I was kind of into the Solomon Kane story in that last.
Yeah, that's good too.
Continue that, and Patrick Zircher's art in this looks pretty good, right?
Sadly, only 8 pages in this second issue. It's a bit short. It felt like an issue of 2000 AD where, you get 8 pages of story for each story. But great quality. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it looks really good. What I do like, though, in that first Richard Pace, Jim Zub thing, it ends with thin, so it means it's fancy. I'm looking at it now. That always makes me laugh. You also have some pinups and things. But I like Solomon Kane a lot, so that's kind of a cool type of deal. But like you said, when I'm paging through it here, it does end up going pretty quick. But by the end, if you're a wrestling fan, Solomon Kane looks a lot like Undertaker at the end with that hat and the lightning behind him. But it looks pretty cool. Again, this is $6.99, so it is a little bit more pricey, but it is actually 50 some pages. I mean, even more. I think it is.
It says 64 on the synopsis, but that's with the ads, the pinups and things as well.
Yeah, and it's one of those things in this next issue. It says you continue the Patrick Zircher Solomon Kane deal. It's the conclusion, but you also end up having, I guess, 3 stories next deal, but not one from Jim Zub. It says next issue of Frank Thierry and Kerry Nord on the conclusion, and a conclusion of Patrick Zircher's deal, but also a Silent Conan story from Alan Qua. So that's kind of
that's intriguing, isn't it? A silent one.
That's pretty cool. And this is more, again, if people aren't aware or don't know, this is kind of the anthology kind of combo type book. So they're probably going to run through a bunch of those things. And if you are reading the main Conan book, this seems like, if you want more, you can get it here. It's not necessary, obviously, but I think it's pretty cool. I like Solomon Kane, so I like with that, but pretty cool deal. But you have one other book. Do you have the credits? Because I'll let you do the credits if you have them.
I do, and this takes me back, Jim. This gives me, nostalgic vibes, because it's a new series debut by Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Risso on art. They were the guys behind 100 Bullets from Vertigo. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, actually, it's one of those other things when I look up lists, because I love lists, and you look up best issues. There's one list that was from Wizard Magazine that I really love, and I use to pick things that I record on our Patreon. The idea of the best comics since you were born. So I end up this, and it's 100 comics, the list. And you'll have stuff that you're like, okay, I've heard of that. There's 400 Bullets things on it, and eventually I'm like, you know what, there's a bunch of these, I should read them, and really a lot of the 100 Bullets stuff, you had a lot of one-shots and things like that, and so I ended up reading a bunch, and each one I really did like, and I'm not a huge Brian Azzarello fan. Some of the things I think he goes a little bit too far sometimes. Again, we talk about that, it's like Garth Ennis when people say, but Brian Azzarello, I don't know. Sometimes the things seem like they have a mean streak to them.
Oh, they do. I didn't like his Hellblazer run. He was on Hellblazer for a bit, and I'm a big Constantine fan, but I got to say, some people liked it, but it just didn't work for me. It didn't seem to work with that character. But he's really good at crime.
Yeah. And the 100 Bullets I thought was really good. Everything that I read, and I suggest people check that out. But this, The Blood Brothers' Mother, I said earlier, I don't like war, horror, or westerns. And we have
Westerns,
a war,
Jim.
and then this is western. But I did like the Enfield Gang a lot. Like,
that was really good.
I don't love the idea of the westerns, but if it's a good story and it works through then I'm fine with it. But it's just one of those things. A lot of times it just kind of takes me out of things. But the Old West was a rough place.
It was a rough place. There have been comparisons to, I don't know if you've ever read it, I keep being told to read this book by Cormac McCarthy called Blood Meridian. It's supposed to be, it's a Western, but it's really dark.
It's funny
really
to say that. That's what I heard about this.
Horrific.
It's supposed to be like Blood Meridian, which is listed as like one of the best of the genre. So if it's going to be compared to something, that's pretty good. But you tell people about this bit.
Beautiful art, by the way, by Eduardo Risso. He's painted the whole thing. It looks like watercolor style. It's oversized. It's the Distillery label, which I'm not that keen on them, Jim. And they are a little bit price off-putting, aren't they? Because it's $8.99 for 48 pages.
Yeah, that's crazy. I actually, this past week or the week before, because it was for this book, I think it was last week, that people ended up, when I had the preview deal, they were oh man, you're not looking forward to this distillery. I said, I'm not on their review list. And so I sent them a message and said, hey, I'm doing this. And, I know how to play the game a bit. And I got a response, no, thank you. I'm like,
what?
It was like, I'm like, what do you mean? Like I said, I was wondering. It was just a weird thing to respond. I said, I was wondering if I could get on the press, review list. I do this stuff. I'm doing more stuff and want to do indie stuff on our YouTube channel and, all the links or whatever. And got usually they just don't respond. No, thank you. I was like, go to hell.
Jim, your reputation precedes you. What's going on?
I end up, because we usually do DC Marvel, so that. But I ended up requesting Boom and Titan were like the other two that I'd done. And they're like, fine, that's great. Welcome aboard and all this stuff. And no, thank you.
No, thank you from Distillery. How dare you?
Yeah, really. I was so angry. I was going to hit it.
How dare you?
Holy moly. But then when I saw this came out, I ended up looking, like you said, the art's the first thing that you'll kind of see, obviously. But some of the pages, they really do look like those, classic Western watercolor landscape paintings that they would have and things like that, certain people collect. My mom at one point got into those for like a second, but she's from England. I'm like, you don't even know what these things are. Stop it.
That's why it was attractive to her, Jim. It's, the unknown.
I guess.
The different, the other.
The unknown would be a book or some schooling. What's the unknown to her? Not so smart. But in the thing, to me, like I said, Azzarello, sometimes the people are kind of, there's no good people. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like everybody. But it works in the Old West. It does work because it was rough. You kind of had to, be rough yourself. But just a brief thing of the story from you. Would be fine.
Okay. What's interesting about it is it tells a story. Well, the title is A Blood Brother's Mother, but we don't really get to know them that well. It's three young kids, some young children. I won't spoil it, but it's from their perspective. But they're going back in time. They're telling how they got to where they are, kind of thing, and why they're out for revenge. So that's basically it's a revenge story, Jim. But man, it is dark. It really is. It's like.
I'm waiting for that Western, so I guess it would be almost like Little House on the Prairie, I guess. I was going to say, I want that Western story where they end up going to a town, everybody strikes gold, everybody's nice to each other, and they all live happily ever after.
Remember happy endings, Jim? I do. It doesn't happen in the West.
It doesn't happen in the Old West. Everything I see in the Old West is like really, really bad. But it's pretty cool. But in that, I think the art's what you get people. But I also think, like you said, the price tag for a new number one, like I mean, I'm telling you, I get it. It's Distillery. It is Brian Azzarello. It's Risso on art, but you're still asking people for a new number one to pay $9 without knowing if it was good or not. That's pretty high. a price. Maybe
I don't know how many new readers it will bring in, if you know what I mean. It'll be probably for the fans of those two, creators. What do you reckon? That's about it.
Yeah, it would have to be just that. And I guess you end up maybe because it takes Eduardo Risso some bit, you don't even have the next issue until July.
Right?
Yeah, so you even skip a month
every 2 months. It looks like.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like it's almost like Distillery. This is what like this book, but there's some things with almost like they're making you work to be a fan of the deal. You have to pay an extraordinary amount of money, and you have to wait extra months for it. But I'm sure it'll do decent enough, and they have their fans. Like I said, and you said, I think that it's a lot of that for their fans, and then hopefully it's good enough that the word of mouth, goes and trickles down, and people check it out. But I don't think it's like an idea of somebody's like some kid's first comic or anything like that.
Oh,
we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. But that's it. That is it for the show. We tried to milk out some time for it. I actually was worried at one point that we're going to have a 3-minute show, but usually when we get together, we're not just going to talk 3 minutes.
Impossible,
we talk stupid stuff where I insult my mother, and we talk about the Grateful Dead and stuff like that. But tell everybody too, this might be a good cool down week for me and you, because next week is packed.
Yes.
We have a lot of good books coming out, and a lot of books that I've been waiting to have come out. Even some conclusions, stuff like that I think that everybody will be excited. I believe that next week we'll have a lot more, hopefully. I mean, you never know. And we end up, like I said, we do the books individually. We can love a series, and if an issue isn't great, we'll tell you it isn't great, or we at least won't have it on the show. But we have stuff like Transformers, Geiger, stuff like that should be pretty cool. And just to let everybody know at this point, I am looking to get some of the free comic book day stuff, and I'll try to do maybe a couple, because those are really quick, a lot of the things, but I'll try to do a couple quick reviews about those, including like the Absolute Power DC one, which I have, but I can't find it on. I'm telling you, I have so many problems with this idea of getting it on the Prime. I get it, but it wasn't on my account, so I'm trying to look, and I'm like, I don't know where the heck it was.
What I'd really like to hear from you is if you can get a copy. I can't get one. The Jeremy Adams Flash Gordon.
Yeah, that's what I want. I gotta get a hold of him. Maybe, but I have a feeling that he would be like, well, I have a physical copy. And by the time I get the physical copy, be like 5 issues into the series. I don't know why it would take that long to get to me, but still, I just kind of want to. Yes, I do. I just want to, read it quick and give a review, because I hope and think that it's going to be really fun. But we'll see. But again, that's it. And if anybody has some things, and I promise there's some issues. I'll tell you right now. I'm not going to mention them. There's some issues this week that I hated, like to the point where I was angry. And then I got even more angry looking. I'm like, how do these people like these things? I ended up seeing one in particular. It's not a big two. That was driving me nuts, that I thought it was.
I saw that.
Yeah, I'm like, it's awful. Like, I didn't even do a video review because I ended up at one point getting so frustrated that I'm like, I don't know. This week was one of those that I got depressed. Me and you were both talking about the idea of getting a little down, and the things weren't great, and whether or not some people, I guess, channels love to yell and scream about things and say how bad things are. It gets you down. It doesn't end up being any fun. And so hopefully next week we'll go back. But again, I ended up like, I don't want to get crap from people. I don't want to argue with people about these books that I thought were horrible, that I swear everybody else loved. But I think people will figure out by now which book I mean, but I did not like it. But that is that. Let everybody, or tell everybody once again, let us know what ones you think are great, good, whatever, in the comments below. And even if you want to, say what you're looking forward to next week already, that'd be great too. So me and Gray, we'll be back next week with a bunch of cool books. But that's it. Thanks for joining me, Gray. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.